welcome back to another amazing episode of Becoming the Light from the Shadows of Abuse. Once again, I have an incredible guest with me, opening her heart, telling her story, and I just so appreciate all of my guests, the way they come forward and use their own experiences just to help and inspire other women, other people who might be stuck with the effects of their past and not knowing how to move forward, or not even knowing they can. So today's guest is Lucy Devi Hall. I'm going to hand over to her. As always, I like my guests to introduce themselves. They know much more about themselves than I do. So I'm going to hand over to her. She's going to tell you about where she is in life at the moment. And then we're going to have a look at when life wasn't quite as good for her as it is now, the journey that she's been on and everything that she's overcome. So Lucy, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you so much. And just tell our listeners something about yourself, where you are in your life now, so that they know who's talking.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's a real honour to be here and to share my story and to support all other women out there that have experienced something similar to me. And where I am right now is my friend, he loved to call me multi-passionate. And I really like that term because right now I'm a life coach and I work with women and help them, really I help them love themselves again. I help them kind of move beyond the trauma and the pain that they've experienced. So that's one thing that I do. I also train and volunteer at a place called the Humaniversity, which is a personal development centre in Holland. And I'm actually going there for a month next Monday.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I also have a sound engineering business, which is I work for various television companies. And I also work for events and I help speakers. I put microphones on speakers and stuff like that. I do the sound at events, which I also love because I get to hear lots of different people speaking. I also write. I became a published author 2 years ago, I think it is now.
And what's your book? What was your book about? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was one of 30 women that was invited to contribute to their story, which is something similar like what you're talking about here. Women that have overcome some kind of adversity.
Yeah.
So I shared my story in that book. And then I'm also a singer-songwriter. I have contributed to 3 albums and I'm currently working on the 4th album. Whew, so it's quite a lot of stuff I do there.
No wonder your friend said that you're multi-passionate, because I got that when I was talking to you. I didn't even know. I didn't know about the book and I didn't know about the songwriting and the album. So that's pretty amazing. And it's all the more incredible to me because, I've spent time talking to you and I know where you started and I know what you've been through. And to think that you could now be where you are is really pretty amazing. So to think that you would overcome so much to become so much, and to discover these passions and these talents. So with that said, just start at the beginning for us and tell us your story, because I know it's going to just inspire so many people. Because when we have such a bad start and we don't get the grounding and the foundations, it's very easy for people then to think that there is no point and that they really just have no idea how to achieve anything. And your story is certainly going to show them that that is absolutely not true. So so just take us back to what you went through and what you've overcome, and share your journey with us.
Well, before I start the story, the reason I'm here sharing my story is because if I can change, if I can move beyond this, anybody can, and I know if you're right in the middle of experiencing your trauma, your feelings, you might think that it's not possible to change. I just want to say to you, it definitely is. You just have to keep going. And I know it might be difficult at sometimes. And I had a friend, he used to work in a children's prison And like he knew my story, and he said, it's just amazing that you're not in a prison. You didn't end up in a prison. You didn't end up dead. I mean, it's like all the things that have happened to you. Because he said, I hear stories that are not even half as bad as yours. So for me, it really began. I grew up in Scotland, which was this is in the 70s. And I was brought up by a white mother, and my father was from Nigeria. So even before I was born, there was kind of trauma in the family because my mother was previously, her first husband was also a white man, and they had a white son, and they lived in Newcastle, which is in the north of England. And her and her husband got divorced, and then she met my dad, who was from Nigeria, and her parents were like, her family were like, we don't want this black person in our family. But she was in love, she got married, and they said, well, look, you have to leave Newcastle. So they went to Glasgow. So already there was that trauma of having that rejection.
Sure.
And it turned out that I'm not quite sure of the whole story, but somehow she wasn't allowed to take her white son with her. So there was that trauma there. And then they went to Glasgow. And in the 70s, it was very, very white, and it was very, very racist. And I was brought up, basically every day I would hear nigger, coon, gollywog, wog, go back to your own country, something like that. And I just grew up feeling like I couldn't even bear to look in the mirror. You know, I just thought there was something so deeply wrong with me. And it was because it was my color, because it was something I couldn't change. I just didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to feel it because it was unchangeable. So that was I was born into that. And then probably around the age of, and what I can remember is the age of 3. That's when I was started to be abused by the first man. So that went on for a number of years, and then by the time I was 5, my dad left to go back to Nigeria, and I couldn't really understand why is he leaving because I was 5 kid. So he left, and then when I was 7, there was another man that molested me, and then my mum died when I was 9. And so I was left to be brought up by my 2 brothers. One was 15 and one was 17, which is pretty crazy. And then between the ages of, I think I was 9 and 17, there was another 5 men that molested me. So all in all, over like 15 years, there was 6 men that abused me. So 6 men abused me. My dad left. I lost my mum, and I was brought up by my 2 teenage brothers. And on top of that, all the racism. So there was a whole kind of host of different things that was happening to me. And then because of that, probably when I was 10, I started to make myself sick, which I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was bulimia.
Yeah.
Um, and probably from then on, like for many years, it was just into survival mode. It was like I was bulimic, I was anorexic, I became a drug addict. I used to cut my arms, like cut myself as a way of coping with things. I had 2 suicide attempts, which luckily they didn't work, but that was when I think the first one was, I was 15, and the other one was when I was 21. And then when I was 21, I actually went into a psychiatric hospital.
See,
And
just
that
so
was
many
really,
people, sorry, so many people listening to this, they're going to have the question in their head. Like, you were a child, you were with 2 brothers who were also children, 15 and
yeah,
17,
yeah,
taking care of you. And I'm pretty certain that everyone listening to this is going to have the same question that I did when you first told me this story. When I said to you, where were social services? How was this even possible? We all think that we live in a world where there are systems to support vulnerable children. And then it's shocking, absolutely shocking, to find out that something like your story, all right, it was a while ago, but how does this happen? How was there no one there for you? No social worker, no teachers, no adult. How did no one step up and say, this is a child that needs caring for? I'm just
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think if I'm really honest with you, I think it was because of the color of our skin. I think we fell through the cracks, or we were let go into the cracks because of the color of our skin. You know, that people kind of. I remember my mum's so-called best friend after she died. Um, she came up to the house, and she didn't know that my mum had died. She came to the house, and my brother said, "Oh, my mum's dead," and she's like, "Oh, okay." And then we never saw her or heard from her again. So it's a very strange situation, you know, like that just. I mean, if I'm honest, some of my teachers, some of my friends' mums, and you know, like kind of kept an eye out for us and stuff like that. But we were just kind of let go and forgotten about, and just you could kind of get on with this stuff yourself. I mean, it's a strange thing, but I think that was because of the color of her skin, to be honest with you.
because I can't even imagine how a 15 and a 17-year-old, how would they even go about providing for you? You know?
Yeah, it's you know what? It's sometimes like I was walking down the street the other day and I saw like a bunch of teenage boys. Because when I was younger, I thought my brothers were like they were always the older brothers and they looked really old. But when I see teenage boys in the street now, I'm just like, oh my God, like look how young they are. And it's just, I think I'm so grateful to my brothers. Like they just did an amazing job, you know. But ultimately, my brother, I think he started just before my mum died. I think he started university, and um, so my mum died, and then he went to the government to try and get money, and they said like our situation. Well, they looked in the rule book. It doesn't exist your situation, so we can't give you any money. So I remember at one point we literally had no money coming in, and we were starving, and it was like their friends asking their parents for money to give to us. You know, we would just buy these big bags of potatoes and big bags of onions and tomatoes, and just like kind of live on that for weeks on end. And then my brother, at some point, he left school or left university, I think it was then, and he got a job. Yeah,
Unbelievable. And see, the big thing about this, you touched on it earlier about, when your dad left, the confusion. There will have been confusion over all of it. And the big
yeah,
problem is that as children, as a child, you look at your situation and you try to make sense of it. When an adult isn't available to explain it to you, you try to make sense of it. And every child ever will always come up with the explanation that it is about them,
yeah,
that it
exactly.
must be your fault, that
I
you're
mean,
somehow not good enough. You're
yeah,
you must be rejected. Your dad must have left because of something to do with you. As a child, you do not reconcile it as, well, my dad must be a pretty bad person to have just walked out on us kids.
yeah, yeah.
That doesn't.
I think that's. I mean, like I know because I've done research on it. That is one of the ways that kids. It's like a coping mechanism because if they think the world is unsafe, that's even more. They can't. You know, they can't
Yes,
grow in that. Can't survive in that. So it has to be about them.
has to be about them.
And I already, you know, like already because of the color of my skin and all the abuse I was getting, I already was blaming myself. I already had this concept of myself as like this really bad, evil, disgusting. I used to, because I used to get told that you're subhuman, you're not even human. So I had this image or had this self concept that I was not even human, you know. So like whenever anything else happened to that, it was almost like, of course, I'm this awful thing anyway, you know.
Yes. So it's like everything that happened to you just confirmed what you already thought about yourself and perpetuated your story.
Yeah,
And of course,
exactly.
that is what happens to all children who are in abusive situations. They
Yeah,
form this idea, they get this perception, and we know why. There's no blame around that.
Yeah.
And then everything that happens to them confirms what they already think about themselves.
Yeah.
And of course, that's one of the major problems of children in abusive situations, that they then go into their adult lives with this such a negative concept of
Yeah.
themselves that has been reinforced right through their childhood.
Yeah.
Um, as you found out. So, and I just bring up these points because so many people listening will be able to relate to what you're saying, and I just like to point out what happened to them, why they made up, why they came to the conclusions they did, and how those patterns run your adult life unless you recognize it and do something about it,
Yeah.
which
I mean,
is
I think that's been the majority of my work, is to excavate like all this self hate,
yeah,
and really to go, like, I was a victim of this stuff. I'm not a bad person. I'm not evil. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, but I'm not evil. I'm not like, and to really dismantle this self image I had. That's what the majority of my work has been. You know, like all the therapy and stuff that I've done,
yeah,
and to really to be able to feel that I'm lovable, like to
yeah,
really feel that I'm lovable and I deserve love, has been a journey. But I can say that now. You know, I feel that I'm a good person, and I'm a good person not because of the things I do, but just because I have a good heart. You know, even all this stuff has happened to me, I have a lot of love in my heart. I have a lot of care. I care about people. I care about the earth. I care about humanity. I care about men. It's not like I hate men. It's like I care, and I think that for me, I would say is my greatest achievement. You know, not really the job and the book and the albums and all the rest of it, but it's that I wake up in the morning and I have a lot of love in my heart, and I want to spread that love. You know, I could easily be a person that's consumed with hate,
yeah.
but I don't want to live like that, you know?
And that is the biggest hurdle for everyone who has some kind of um, abuse, trauma, anything in their background that has caused this pre-patterning of not good enough and of hating themselves. And
Yeah,
it's realizing the enormous switch that comes about when you start to operate from a position, I always call it a foundation or a platform of love for yourself.
yeah,
It changes everything. Not
yeah,
just love, because love for yourself, as you've found, turns into love of life, love of people, pretty much just a general positive attitude and enjoyment of everything,
yeah,
that we call the flow of abundance, and
yeah,
it becomes love of yourself.
yeah. I think that's what's been able for me to be able to like be multi-passionate and express myself in different ways and follow different dreams and passions, is because I have done the work to love myself, because it's, you know, that for me is self-love, is being able to follow these dreams and desires and, you know, give it to myself. You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's funny because I was talking about this. I was told at school that I couldn't write. I wasn't a good writer. And I remember also at school, I was in the choir once. I was singing in the choir. I was all excited and I was singing at the front. And my teacher was like, "Can you go to the back, please?" So those two things, I stopped me from writing and stopped me from singing. So it was really like, but I like doing these things, and to actually, you know, when I had to sit down when I was writing the chapter in the book, I sat there for 6 weeks staring at a blank page, because I came up against that belief, you know, and it was like I had to do the work to move through that. And it was the
Mhm.
same when I first went into the studio to sing. I remember standing in the singing booth, and I had the producer and other people outside, and I was just standing there, and I had just had a shame attack. You know, I was just standing there going, "Oh my God, they're going to think I'm terrible, and I think I'm terrible." But I wanted it so much that I just kept, you know, like for me, it feels like this is a healing journey. It's constantly like just moving through, and um, and even now, like this past week with all this, you know, like the Black Lives Matter and the protests, it's brought up another layer of healing for me to look at to look at my
Mhm.
race again, to look at what that means to me and how I'm showing up in the world. So it's almost like a path for me. It's like I'm willing to keep looking at whatever comes up, and I think I can do that because I have a strong heart and strong love towards myself.
Well, and you've already done some of it, so you've already proved that. I love the phrase you just used, when you just want it so much. And that's just indicative of everyone who does this healing journey, this from this past trauma to overcome all these negative thoughts and feelings. And that's really what it's all about, wanting it so much that you just keep moving forward. You
Yeah.
just keep doing it. And I just love that you just used that phrase about want it so much. I could just feel it. So, but how did you get there? I mean, that's a very big thing, to be told that you can't write, told that you can't sing, and then to just be faced with saying that you're, like, you agreed, something inside you knew that you could do this. You wanted to write a chapter, and
Mm,
like, you chose to the safest thing to do was say no. The safest thing to do was to give in to the no, I can't write, because, but you didn't do that. You stepped
yeah.
way out of your comfort zone. That I just want to hear more about this, because that just takes such enormous courage. Like 99.9% of people faced with that opportunity would have just said, "No, I can't do it." It's like a lot of people that, people approach me about coming on the podcast, and then when they actually come down to telling their story, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do it."
Mm,
You
yeah.
know, but and for
Yeah.
you, I'm absolutely in awe of the steps that you took, the things that you said yes to, and the stories about yourself that you've overcome. I think it's amazing.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
actually, I mean, it's good to talk about it. I don't really talk about it so often, but I think there's a few factors here. I think when I look back, I think it first goes back to my mum. I think she, even like I only had 9 years with her. She installed enough love. She gave me
Right.
enough love that even with all this that happened to me, even in those moments where I was sitting like, I want to die, there was something in me that was not destroyed by the abuse, by the racism. There was that little flame that was not touched,
Mhm.
and I think it was my love, but it was her love that kind of encased that. And so I think anytime I've taken steps, like when I was in psychiatric hospital, and then I got a therapist, and then I went to the Humaniversity to heal, and it's always been about like expanding that space. And
So tell us more about that. Is that where your journey began? Because a while ago, I interrupted you to bring up an important point when you were talking about how I think you said you were 22 and you ended up in a psychiatric
yeah,
hospital. Is that really where your healing journey began?
I would say it is. After my first suicide attempt, I think it was 15. Actually, now I remember. I had I was taken to hospital, um, and I remember the doctor said to me, he said, if you want to kill yourself, you need to slash your arm up the way, not across. And that was kind of like his feedback. So I didn't really have any help then. And after a while, I was still kind of, in a real mess. And then when I was 21, I think I think it was after another suicide attempt. And then I was seeing a psychiatrist as an outpatient. And I remember being so overwhelmed with everything. And I thought, I don't want to live anymore. I can't take another day of this. And I went to see my psychiatrist and I said, look, you have to help me. I'm not going to survive another day. So she ended up putting me in hospital for 3 months. And I remember I went in and I was sharing a room with this woman. And as at my first day in, I think she was 40 and she was anorexic. And she left. So my first day in was her last day. And then 3 months later, when I was leaving, she was coming back in. And
Right.
I said, how long have you been doing this? And she said, oh, since I was like 20. And I thought, there's got to be another way. There's got to be another way other than just, this is my life. And I come back and in and I'm, I thought, no, there's got to be another way. And for me, it was like that moment of, okay, I'm going to find another way because I want more from life. There has to be another way. And then I ended up finding a therapist, and I was in therapy for 7 years. Um, and I remember, even though I was in therapy, it was like a lifeline, seeing my therapist. But at the time, during that whole time, my addiction was just spiraling out of control. And then at one point, I was just like, I remember waking up and thinking, I cannot live another day like this.
So what
You
was
know,
your addiction to during that time? Was this still food, or was
well,
it
I
other
had food,
things as
but
well?
then it became cocaine.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So that was probably for about 10 years when I was addicted to that. And
And
I,
this is very important because a lot of people don't understand. I mean, we talk about addicts and addiction, but I'm always amazed still the number of people that kind of traditionally look at addicts as like terrible, downtrodden people, which they are to a degree, but there's still an incredible lack of understanding of what sits behind addiction. And now, in my work, and obviously in yours as well, I come across it all the time. And the reason trauma and abuse and addiction go hand in hand is because any addiction ever, whether it's food, sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is needs. And it's the internal void
mm,
due to unmet childhood needs. And it's a
yeah,
person's attempt to fill that internal void with something outside of themselves. And as
yeah,
you know, the only thing that can fill it is love for yourself.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. And I mean, everyone's got their drug of choice or their whatever of choice, you
Hmm.
know. It's like I'd taken various drugs, and it was only when I took cocaine, because I was very introverted. I was very like shut down and closed off. I remember I took cocaine, and it was like, it made me kind of like, yeah, I can talk to people. And it was just like,
Right.
I can be a normal person. That's what it felt like. I get the chance to be a normal person where I'm not like hiding in the corner, hating myself. I'm able to talk, and of course, it's not sustainable, and it's not an
Mm.
answer. And then it just spirals out of control, and then you take it anyway, and you don't actually get that feeling. You just get that, then the actual addiction to the substance takes over.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, it's definitely trying to fill that void of. I mean, I think it does two things. It's filling the voids, but it's also numbing the pain.
Yeah.
It's numbing the pain because I had so much pain. I had so much pain inside of me that I just didn't even want to. It was so overwhelming that I just had suppressed most of it. But any little bit that got through, I would use food, I would use drugs, I would use isolation, whatever. I would just like, I don't want to feel this. And it was only when I really started to, I found this place called the Humaniversity that I went there
Tell
and I
us about
started to
that. Tell us about that.
well, yeah, it was I think it was I woke up one day after having taken drugs, like I'd had this night of taking lots of drugs. And I woke up and I just thought, I can't do this. I mean, it's like, is this it? And I remember opening a magazine and it had an article about this place. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go, and I just packed my bag and went there for a weekend, which turned into 6 months. Um, and it's actually like, it's a community. It's what they call a therapeutic community. And it turns out it was set up by a guy who, he was an addict himself. He was a heroin addict. And there's a famous, what's it called? Rehab called Phoenix House, which was a big thing in the 70s and 80s. So he set that up in London, and then he went and set up his own place in Holland. And because his training was with working with addicts who are so hardcore and had kind of figured out every way to play the system, he was very hardcore and very able to dismantle like all your coping mechanisms. You know,
Okay.
all the ways that you avoided pain, all the ways that you manipulated people, all the ways that you manipulated yourself, all the ways that you were in denial, all the, you know, and also at the same time he'd studied Eastern mysticism, so he also had the spiritual element, and he brought that, and at the source of that was like, you're lovable just the way you are. That was his message. So having those two things for me was just like, oh, finally I've got a place where I can really like get rid of all this pain that's inside of me, and also dismantle all the coping mechanisms and focus on feeling like self-love. So that was, for me, it
Amazing.
was it was really transformative, and still I go there, you know, because I want to support other people to have the kind of the shift that I've had.
Wow. So that's
Yeah,
what got you to where you are today.
that's what got me to it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That really is. I I can't hear your story without, just dwelling on how young you were and how vulnerable and just how you were just left by the system. I think that's what really, really gets me,
Mm,
you know.
yeah. I remember
Um,
reading about a similar story of, not a similar story. I mean, the kids had lost. There was three kids, and they'd lost their parents, and they were white. And I remember like the whole, you know, they had social services, they had loads of help and support, and you know everything around them. And that was, for me, was really like, wow, okay, that's what happened to them, and this is what happened to us. So for me, it was really to do with us being black in Scotland.
right.
That's why that happens to us.
Yeah. And of course, for everyone listening, you touched on it. And coincidentally, we are recording this not only at the kind of well into the COVID-19 epidemic, but around the time of the Black Lives Matter movement in America, just to give this some kind of dating and positioning um, as we move on. So yeah, very good timing for this message. Looking
Mm.
at how we treat people of different races, and oh, I know we were talking earlier about, it just brings up the worst of humanity, which of course your story does as well. And sometimes we just need to look at ourselves as a race. I know we need to look at ourselves as people, but we definitely need to look at ourselves as a race.
I heard
Uh,
someone say we're a global race, and I like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how we need to see ourselves. Just one.
Mm.
Just one. Yeah. So, but so your story, what you've been through, your story of recovery, the image of you getting up to sing and to write your chapter and everything, just amazing. And sometimes it just, as you said, it just comes down to wanting it enough and to just pushing through that pain and through the comfort zone, and just look at the achievement that's on the other side. You
Mm,
know, I mean,
mm.
how good did you feel when you actually wrote a chapter, and then when you're singing and you realize you can sing, you know?
Oh, that's good. It's good that you asked that question, because the book was released. It was a Canadian publishing house, and we had a book launch in Canada, which I actually went to.
Did you?
Yeah, yeah, and it was released on International Women's Day as well.
Oh,
And I mean, there was so many mixed feelings. I felt so proud of myself, really.
and so you
And
should have done.
yeah, and it was, you know, there was people there that were going, "Oh, can I take a picture with you?" And you know, I just found it so touching. It's like, I'm just little Lucy. It's like, you know, this is crazy, you know, like media in the media. But it was really sweet. And then I think what was even more sweet, because I talked about my, you know, like I touched on. I didn't go right into the story of my overcoming the sexual abuse, and then I had like people reach out to me saying, "Oh, I bought this story." There's one guy actually he reached out and said, "I bought the book." and I'm giving it to my daughter because the stories of women overcoming this, the stories of women being powerful, I want her
Yeah.
to read this and be touched by it. And it's like really like that. That's what gets to me. It's like that's what it's about. It's like that's why I tell my story. That's why I talk about these things because I want it to have an impact. So when I hear about having an impact, and there's other women that have like written to me because they've had a similar experience, and like being able to inspire hope in others for me is just it's amazing. I love it. And then with the music, I have to say I'm still very shy at singing in front of people. It's like when I go into the singing booth, I do prefer to be on my own. um but there's two guys I work with, the studio manager and the producer. We're very close, and it's much more, it's much more relaxing. And I've actually, I would say, over the past few months I've had more of a breakthrough again because I had a friend at work, and he said, I've got this song, I've got this music, like this background music. Would you put a melody and some vocals on it? And he sent it to me, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure. And I did it, I recorded it and sent it off to him without even thinking about it. So being able to do that, and just go, I don't really care what anyone thinks. I enjoy my voice. So, but yeah, I remember once as well, I was in a supermarket and I heard someone singing my song, and it was so like, wow, it's just amazing to hear that. And I know that the album, because the music is part of the Humaniversity. They have their own
Okay, I was just about to
recording
ask
studio.
you, where do you release your music? I mean, people listening might want to hear you.
Yeah, well, it's on iTunes, so
Okay,
you can check it out there. I think it's on Spotify as well, if you want to
you'll
listen
have
to
to
it.
make sure that we've got the links to your music and to
Yeah,
your
yeah,
book and
I'll do
everything,
that.
and then obviously in the show notes we can
Yeah,
post the book, the
yeah,
links, yeah, and people can get hold of you in any way that they want to.
yeah, definitely. And also what I love about the music we make, because we make music like the album we're working on now is called The Gratitude Meditation. So it's really about helping people, sit through this, go through this process and tap into gratitude. And we made one called the Friendship Meditation, there's the Peace Meditation, there's the Love Meditation. So everything has a kind of theme around it. And that's what I love as well, because when people are listening to this music, it's touching something inside. So it's
Right.
also impacting people.
So it's
So I love that.
meditations that you do.
Yeah, I mean, call it meditation, but it's not just sitting silently. It's also
Hmm.
there's dancing and there's interacting with people, and there's various stages. So
Okay, sounds good. So, but it's all
yeah, yeah,
about going inwards and healing and looking at yourself in different ways.
yeah. It's about healing. It's about
Yeah.
healing yourself inside, and it's also about healing your relating with other people.
Which is what
Yeah,
we all need to do. I'm sure anyone listening to this needs to do that to some degree, or they wouldn't be listening. So,
exactly, exactly.
well, thank you so much. An amazing story, and just your courage and everything that you've been through and everything you've become. I'm sure it's just incredible for people to listen to and to know what's possible, no matter what has happened in the past. Um,
Yeah.
do you have? We will put up your links so people can contact you if they want to. But do you have any kind of final words of wisdom on top of what you've already shared, just for our listeners?
Yeah, I really want people to know that you can change. I know if you're in the depth of pain and trauma, and you might think that it's never going to change. All you need to do is just keep taking one small step at a time. That's all I did, and I keep doing that every day. I keep taking one small step, and I've surrounded myself by really good people. I've got the support that I need. Um, so together with those two things, with the support, the people, the friends, and taking one step, that's how I've managed to change my life. And if I can do it, you can do it too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know that all of us working in this space, we all say the same. We were all just ordinary people who went through a seriously hard time in one way or another. And we all got to the point where we felt totally broken. And we decided that we have to heal this. There has to be another way,
Yeah.
exactly as you said. So, yeah. So, well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate your honesty, your openness, and yeah, just for showing people this love for yourself that you've discovered, that you've created, that you've pursued because you
Yeah.
wanted it so much. Appreciate that a lot.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me on and allowing me to share my stories. It's
Oh,
been a real joy. Thank you.
thank you.